Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'd like to share with you the story of James and Diep, along with a very special appearance that will deeply change the emotions and perspectives of everyone involved. I hope you'll watch the video all the way through, because every detail is closely connected, opening a new chapter in the journey of these characters. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we continue following the story of Diep and CEO James, two people who seem to come from completely different worlds, yet meet at the crossroads of their deepest wounds, and from there, walk together through the darkness to find light in their lives. Diep was once a small, frail girl who grew up in poverty and deprivation. Her childhood had no warm evenings around a family meal, no caring questions, no protective embraces. Instead, it was filled with hardship and a sense of loneliness, even in the very place she was born. At a very young age, Diep was sold by her family into marriage with a stranger, like a commodity exchanged to resolve immediate difficulties. She had no choice, no voice in her own life. That marriage did not give Diep a home, nor was it a place of refuge. It became a long chain of abuse, fear, and humiliation. Diep lived in silence, in suffocation and forced endurance. Each passing day felt like a heavy stone pressing against her chest. She once believed her life would be forever buried in that darkness, that there would be no escape, no day when she could truly live. Until James appeared. James was a calm, mature man with a quiet strength of his own. He wasn't loud or showy. Instead, he carried a steadiness that made people feel safe around him. James met Diep at a time when she had almost completely lost faith in life and in people. Her eyes then held only exhaustion and despair, as if she had grown used to being hurt and no longer expected anything good. James didn't come to pity Diep, nor did he make empty promises. He stayed quietly by her side, observing, listening, and step by step helped her escape that hellish marriage. His protection wasn't in grand words, but in concrete actions, in steadfastness and responsibility. He showed Diep that she was not wrong to want a better life, and that she fully deserved a chance to start over. To James, Diep was not a weak or pitiful woman in need of rescue. In his eyes, she was someone of value, a woman who had endured immense suffering yet still preserved kindness and warmth in her soul. James respected Diep not because of her past, but because of who she was in the present, a person striving to stand up again after ruin. Diep's new life slowly began to unfold, gradually, but clearly. She started learning how to take care of herself, how to listen to her emotions, and no longer live in constant fear. Nights haunted by past trauma became fewer, replaced by peaceful mornings when she knew she was in a safe place. She no longer startled at the sound of footsteps or trembled whenever someone raised their voice. Along this journey of rebuilding her life, Diep and James met little Nee, a 4-year-old orphan, small and timid. The child spoke little, her eyes always carrying caution, as if she had grown accustomed too early to the absence of loving arms. From the very first moment Diep saw Nee, her heart tightened. In those innocent eyes, Diep saw her own younger self, a little girl who longed for love but didn't know where to cling. Without much discussion or hesitation, Diep and James decided to adopt Nee. It wasn't an impulsive decision, but a choice born of deep understanding and empathy. They weren't just giving Nee a home, they wanted to give her what both of them had once lacked, the feeling of truly belonging to a family. From that moment on, the once quiet house became warmer than ever. Simple meals now echoed with the child's clear laughter. In the evenings, Diep held Nee in her arms, gently telling bedtime stories, while James stood quietly behind them, watching with a soft smile. He became a solid pillar, not only for Diep, but also for that small, fragile child. For the first time in her life, Diep truly understood what a family was. Not a place filled with fear or endurance, but a place of peace, love, and hearts willing to stay together, no matter how wounded the past may have been. Diep once believed that she had lost everything a long time ago. Not money or status, but the most fundamental things a person could lose: family, roots, and even the right to know who she was and where she came from. She had never allowed herself to look too deeply into the past, let alone dare to dream of the words biological mother. To Diep, everything behind her felt like a dark, tightly locked door. Behind it lay only pain and wounds. She chose not to turn back, because she feared that even the slightest touch would make every scar bleed once more. The present was already more than enough for Diep. By James's side, the man who had pulled her out of the deepest abyss of her life, and beside little Nee, the child who gave her the feeling of being a mother, of loving and protecting someone, Diep felt she was living the most peaceful days she had ever known. She wanted nothing more. Each morning, waking up in the small house, hearing Nee call out Mom, seeing James in the kitchen making coffee, those moments alone felt like the greatest gift life could give her. Diep once thought that as long as she held tightly to this present, nothing else truly mattered. Until something unusual began to happen. At first, Diep only sensed something vague, an indescribable feeling, as if someone were quietly watching her every step. At the familiar market she visited each morning, she found herself turning around more than once, clearly feeling a gaze on her back. But when she looked around, everything seemed normal, people passing by, the usual bustle, nothing truly suspicious. She reassured herself that perhaps she was simply overthinking. But the feeling did not go away. On the familiar road where she took me to school, Diep began to notice a black car often parked at a distance. Not close enough to draw attention, yet not far enough to ignore. Each time she saw it, she felt a slight tightening in her chest, as if an invisible string were being pulled taut inside her. She couldn't see clearly who was inside the car, only the faint outline of a middle-aged woman, neatly dressed, her face always turned toward Diep and her daughter. Even in front of her own home, the place Diep had always believed to be absolutely safe, that feeling followed her. Some afternoons, when she led Nee out into the yard, she would unexpectedly catch that gaze from afar. It wasn't a curious or intrusive look, but one that lingered, deep, heavy, as if filled with emotions long suppressed. Diep couldn't understand why. Every time their eyes met, her heart beat faster than usual and a sense of confusion and discomfort rose within her. During those days, Diep became quieter. She didn't tell James, nor did she want to worry Nee. She kept telling herself that it was probably just coincidence, or perhaps the same person happening to appear in different places. But deep down, Diep knew this was not merely random. And then, one seemingly ordinary afternoon, everything changed. That day, Diep brought Nee home earlier than usual. The sun had just set, and the space in front of the gate felt strangely quiet. As the two of them stepped inside, the familiar sound of an engine came from behind. Diep turned around, and the black car she had been seeing for days slowly came to a stop right in front of her gate. The car door opened. A middle-aged woman stepped out, her movements slow and hesitant. She stood there, only a few meters from Diep, her eyes never leaving Diep's face. In that moment, Diep could clearly sense the woman's trembling, not from cold, but from emotion. The woman's hands clenched tightly, as if she had to gather all her courage just to remain standing. The world seemed to freeze. The woman looked at Diep for a long time. This time, her gaze was no longer distant as before, but filled with anguish, longing, and restrained pain. Her voice shook as she finally spoke, weak, yet sharp enough to pierce straight into Diep's heart. "Why you're Diep, aren't you?" Just one short question, but it struck Diep like a bolt of lightning. She froze, her entire body stiff, her breath caught in her chest. Her heart pounded so hard her ears rang, the sounds around her fading away. Diep couldn't react, didn't know whether to answer or step back, because in that instant, it felt as though the past she had buried for so many years was being violently dragged out of the darkness. The woman didn't wait for an answer. She broke down in tears, years of suppressed sorrow spilling out uncontrollably. Through choking sobs, she spoke a truth that nearly robbed Diep of her strength. She was Diep's biological mother. In that very moment, Diep's world completely collapsed. James appeared almost instantly, as if by pure instinct. He stepped forward quickly, positioning himself between Diep and little Nee, forming an invisible yet solid wall of protection. His arm moved slightly behind him, a subtle gesture meant to reassure Diep and keep Nee in a safe position. James's gaze was not aggressive, but it was sharp and alert, revealing his heightened vigilance. Standing before him now was not just a stranger, but a story too big, too sudden, carrying a truth buried for decades, a truth that could not be believed on the strength of a few words alone. James kept his voice low and calm, even though a flood of questions surged within him. He understood that a single misstep, a trust placed in the wrong place, could hurt Diep and Nee once again. He would not allow that to happen. His composure was not coldness, but the necessary control of a man accustomed to bearing responsibility and protecting his family. After a long, heavy silence, the gate closed. The woman was invited into the small house, a place once familiar only with simple, peaceful moments, now suddenly suffocating under layers of tangled emotion. As soon as she stepped inside, she seemed unable to remain standing. She broke down in sobs, her crying raw and uncontrollable, filled with pain that had clearly been held back for years, as if all that repression had waited for this very moment to burst forth. In the quiet space of the house, her voice trembled and broke as she began to recount the story from years ago. She said it all started with a single moment of carelessness, a moment she had paid for with a lifetime of remorse. That year, through an instant of negligence, she lost her young daughter. When she realized what had happened, her world collapsed. Desperate calls, frantic searches, none of them brought results. That child, Diep, had vanished from her life, leaving behind a void nothing could ever fill. That shock was not only the pain of losing a child, but the relentless torment of guilt. The woman said she fell into severe depression, to the point where she could no longer live a normal life. Endless sleepless nights, sudden panic attacks, and the haunting belief that she had lost her daughter forever broke her spirit. In the end, her family had no choice but to send her abroad for treatment, hoping that a change of environment and medical care might help her survive the psychological trauma. Yet no matter where she was, no matter the circumstances, she insisted that she never stopped searching for Diep, not for a single day. The years of treatment did not ease her longing, instead, they carved it even deeper into her mind. She searched in desperation, following the faintest clues, carrying a fragile hope that one day she might see her daughter again, even if only from afar. While the woman spoke through sobs, Diep sat silently on the chair. She did not cry. She did not speak. Her face was strangely calm, but inside her, a violent storm of emotions was raging. Every word from the woman fell like fragments of memory, colliding with thoughts that had been embedded in Diep's mind for so many years. She did not know whether to believe or to be afraid. Throughout her life, Diep had carried the belief that she was a discarded child, someone no one had chosen. That belief had become a kind of armor, painful yet familiar, allowing her to survive. She had learned to accept that she had no mother, no clear roots, that loneliness was something she was simply destined to bear. And that belief, cruel as it was, had spared her from hope, because hope always carried the risk of being hurt. Now, right in front of her, was a woman crying to the point of collapse, insisting she had never abandoned her, that everything had been nothing more than a tragic accident. This left Diep more confused than ever. If what the woman said was true, How could all the years of suffering Diep had endured be explained? And if it was not true, then why would a complete stranger carry such profound pain? Diep lowered her head, her hands clenched tightly together. She was afraid to face the spark of hope that had just flickered within her. Because she knew all too well, if that hope proved false, this fall would hurt more than anything she had ever endured before. To ensure everyone's safety, and more importantly, so that no one would have to continue living in doubt, James made a firm decision. He didn't speak at length or evade the issue. He simply looked steadily at the woman in front of him, then turned to Diep, as if to make sure she wouldn't face this alone. His voice was low, clear, and calm, yet carried an unshakable resolve. "We need to do a DNA test." The words echoed through the quiet space of the small house, not loud, but strong enough to end all speculation. This wasn't doubt meant to offend, but the only way to protect Diep from believing the wrong thing, from hoping in vain, and from being hurt once again. James understood that only a clear truth could close the chain of unanswered questions now weighing on Diep's heart. The woman did not object. Almost immediately, she nodded. Not a second of hesitation, not a single word of defense or reproach. Her eyes reflected acceptance, perhaps even relief, as if she had been preparing herself for this moment for a long time. She understood that if what she said was true, a DNA test was the shortest path to proving it. And if it wasn't, she was still ready to face it, because at least she had finally spoken the truth she had carried inside for so many years. She quietly provided the required samples. Every movement was slow and careful, as though she feared that a single misstep might cause her chance to reach the truth to slip away. Throughout the entire process, her eyes never left Diep for even a second. It was a gaze filled with remorse, longing, and a very human fear, the fear that once this door closed, she might lose the daughter she had only just found all over again. When everything was done, the woman stood up. She didn't say another word, nor did she dare step any closer. She simply turned and walked out, each step heavy, as if carrying a lifetime of regret. Before leaving, she paused briefly at the doorway, turned back to look at Diep one more time, her eyes trembling as she tried to memorize every line of Diep's face, as though afraid that if she didn't look long enough, the image would disappear. The door closed. The sound was soft, but to Diep it thundered in her heart. In that moment, all her strength seemed to drain away. She stood frozen in the middle of the room, instinctively wrapping her arms tightly around little Nee. The child didn't fully understand the adult's situation, but she felt her mother's unease and hugged Diep back, pressing her head into Diep's chest. Diep's whole body trembled. Not from cold, but from fear, a vague yet crushing fear that left her unable to grasp her own emotions. Her mind filled with unanswered questions. She didn't know what awaited her ahead, whether it would be the truth the woman had spoken, or just another pain, another wound carved deeper into all the suffering she had endured for so many years. Diep was afraid to hope. Yet she wasn't strong enough to completely extinguish it either. James stepped forward without rushing to speak. He gently placed a hand on Diep's shoulder, then pulled her into his arms. His embrace was warm and steady, a support to keep her from collapsing at that moment. His voice softened, slow and certain, each word sinking deeply into Diep's mind. "It's okay. No matter what the result is, you still have a family." It wasn't an empty promise, nor a fleeting comfort, it was a statement of fact. James wanted Diep to understand that no matter what the past held, no matter whether that woman truly was her biological mother or not, the present would not change. Diep still had him, had Nee, had a home and people willing to stay by her side, not walk away. Diep gently closed her eyes, resting her head against James's chest. In that moment, she no longer thought about the DNA test, nor the results waiting ahead. She focused only on holding on to this feeling, the feeling of being protected, being chosen, and being called family. The 3 days of waiting ahead were not simply 3 days marked off on a calendar for Diep. They became the longest, heaviest days of her life, when every hour and every minute dragged on in a suffocating silence. Time no longer flowed naturally, instead, it felt stretched thin, turning each moment into a trial for a heart that had already endured too much pain. During those days, hope and fear intertwined endlessly. At times, Diep would find herself thinking of the trembling eyes of that woman, of the choked voice that called her name, and a fragile spark of hope would rise within her. If that woman truly was her biological mother, then perhaps the years Diep had lived in suffering were not the result of abandonment, but of a cruel twist of fate that had torn mother and daughter apart. The thought was just warm enough to soften her heart, yet dangerous enough to frighten her. Because soon after, fear would return. Diep was afraid that it was all a misunderstanding, or worse, another cruel mistake life had prepared for her. She feared that she had allowed hope to slip in, only for everything to collapse once more when the results were revealed. Over the years, Diep had learned to live without expectation, because she knew that the greater the hope, the deeper the disappointment. The past and the present collided violently within her. On one side were fragmented, blurred memories, the image of a child growing up without knowing where she belonged. On the other was her peaceful present with James and little Nee, a place where she was loved, protected, and called family. Diep didn't know whether, once the truth came to light, these two worlds could coexist, or whether she would be forced to face a change she was not yet ready to accept. The same questions echoed in her mind again and again, without answers. Was that woman truly her biological mother? And if so, what would the DNA test results bring into Diep's life? Would they close a chapter of sorrow by returning the truth to where it belonged, or open a new wound, deeper and harder to heal? Would the past finally be mended, or would it continue to demand a price from Diep in emotions she believed she had already overcome? All of these questions still hung in the air, waiting for a single answer, an answer that could change Diep's life forever. All truths will gradually be revealed in the next episode. Don't miss it.
Chào mọi người đã quay trở lại với kênh của mình nhé. Mình đang làm video mọi người. Chắc là phải thay vào thôi. Cảm ơn mọi người đã theo dõi video của mình nhé. Tạm biệt mọi người nhé.